This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
Friends, there is royalty in the house today on this episode of Real Talk. I'm not joking around. I'm not messing around. I mean, look at this. If you're watching us on YouTube, this is the crown. This is the crown presented to Miss Universe Canada Ashley Callingbull, joining us in this episode of Real Talk, which promises to be one that you're going to want to watch from start to finish. Miss Universe Canada, then the federal immigration minister. We're going to take his questions. Why is he in Alberta? And what's the federal government doing about a story out of Reuters that shows that many Canadians feel like it's time for the feds to crack down, for Canada to amend its immigration policy in significant fashion. Then a Real Talk roundtable to wrap up this episode. The Strategists are back. That's right. Zain, Stephen, and Corey, co-hosts of one of Canada's most popular, most downloaded political podcasts, will bring us through to the end of this podcasting week. Now, this specific episode would not be possible without the help of Alberta's top online real estate school. That's Relo, our presenting sponsor in this episode, and their message is simple. If you're looking to a career in real estate, you love the idea of setting your own hours, being your own boss, having unlimited earning potential, you're going to want to make sure you visit relo.ca first. That's RELO.ca. Why? Because they have a team of experienced professionals that are going to help you prepare for your exam. They're going to make sure you're all set as you get licensed, and then they'll be there with you as you launch your career. Don't forget, the promo code Ryan100 is going to knock $100 off the Alberta commercial real estate bundle and another $100 off the Alberta residential real estate bundle. Get your career in real estate started on the right foot by using the promo code Ryan100 at relo.ca. As we officially welcome to the studio newly minted royalty. Everybody in Canada knows the name Ashley Callingbull, and now obviously it's official. She is Miss Universe Canada. Congratulations, friend. How are you feeling?
Really good, on cloud nine. I still can't believe it, honestly. Like, I wake up and I'm like, oh yeah, I made history. Oh my God. Yeah, it's still soaking it all in.
It was incredible. You arrive at the studio this morning and you're carrying this. It looks like one of these cases that you know someone would have handcuffed to their wrist so nobody can steal it. And I wasn't quite sure what was in that case, but I thought, gosh, I hope it's the crown. And there it is. You just stare at that thing.
Yeah. Oh, I still can't believe I have it. I feel like I just want to wake up with it, walk around the house, doing dishes, having coffee.
I would do have you done a little bit of that?
A little. I'm like, I had to, just to be like, take it all in and be like, oh my God, I'm Miss Universe Canada. I'm going to Miss Universe. Like, there's so many times I have to say it to myself, and I'm like, I can't believe this is really happening.
I feel like everybody else can believe it because they've seen what's been going on with you, and this career trajectory that's been unbelievable. And everybody's obviously very proud of you. You've become a household name across the country, but you sort of come across as somebody who can still walk a few miles in the shoes of that little girl who one day just dreamed of doing something like this.
Yeah, that little girl. Oh my God. You know, I started pageants in my community in Enoch, and I started doing like powwow pageants. So for us, we danced in our regalia, we spoke our language, everything was community based and traditional. So that was where I started my pageant career, was at home. So I've always wanted to be Miss Universe and never thought, but now it's like, the dream is here. An Indigenous woman, First Nations woman is going to Miss Universe. It makes me so proud.
So for people that don't maybe exactly understand what Miss Universe Canada is, you're headed to Miss Universe, and you are Canada's representative.
Yes, it's like, I try to explain it to people in hockey terminology because Canadians get that. For me, I feel like I won the Western Conference Finals. Now I'm going to my Stanley Cup. It's like, that's how I try to explain it to people. It's like the best of the best compete together, or also in Olympics terms, like I'm representing our nation at the Olympics.
Yeah, no kidding. Except for in this case, you're allowed to touch the trophy. You're allowed
Olympics
to touch the crown.
Pageantry,
right?
yeah.
The Olympics of pageantry. You are the first Indigenous woman ever to win Miss Universe Canada, and Canada has one of the longest standing competitions of any nation in the world. So number one, it's a little bit surprising that that's never happened before, but let me ask you what that means to you personally.
means everything. That representation is probably the most important thing, to feel seen, to feel heard, because I've never seen anyone that's looked like me before. And now knowing that there's young Indigenous girls that are looking up and seeing a face that looks like theirs, that makes a huge impact, because it makes them feel like, oh, if she could do something like this, then what can I do? What can I accomplish? So it's inspiring to me, being able to open these eyes to these little girls and see what's possible.
Do you spend a lot of time back where you grew up? Do you spend a lot of time back in Enoch?
Yeah.
And if so, do you get little kids, little boys and little girls coming up to you and telling you exactly what you're describing?
So when I'm in the community, I love when kids come up to me and they tell me about the great things that I'm doing. But I just recently did something in partnership with Reitmans for my community. So I try to give back as much as I can. So with the arts program, I'm in the arts, created something for them. We're able to raise funds for them. And I did a video, actually. If you ever want to check my Instagram and donate back to the Enoch Youth Arts Program, there's a video on my Instagram for Reitmans, and it was about sharing how art is a way for us to create and express ourselves. So for me, giving back to the youth in my community means a lot, because that's where I came from, right? It's important to always go back home.
Look at your Instagram, 2 million followers. 2 million followers. Does that blow your mind, or does that just seem normal now?
Yeah, I don't even know who they all are. So, I'm just I don't know. But it feels good, though, to have that support and from everyone around the world. I have followers that are from pageantry, from filming, from sports, from the sports world. So it's a wide range of people, but it feels really good to have support in all aspects.
How do you prepare? Miss Universe coming up in Mexico, you said in November, I think?
Yeah.
So is this, if we're going to stay on the hockey analogy or the hockey metaphor here, do you go back to training camp? Because,
yeah.
We follow you. Johnny and I follow you on Instagram, and you would post on your stories. You were training hard for this. I'm talking physical, all kinds of different stuff.
Yeah, a couple people I know were saying, you have that Sidney Crosby work ethic, and I've never heard that before, and I've heard that from an actual hockey player. So that was kind of wow. But I'm one of those people, I think when I'm training or working out or preparing, I'm there's always someone that's going to be working harder than me that wants it more than me, and I want to be that person. So that's how I think. And I'm once I'm very goal oriented, I get it accomplished. I'm what else can I do? There's always room for improvement. That's how I think. I don't get lazy. I'm there's always room for improvement.
So can you take us into your playbook, or is there a certain strategy that you have going into Mexico?
Even with training for Miss Universe Canada, it was 7 months of preparation, whether it was physical, runway, interviews, humanitarian work, working on my projects. It was just every day was devoted to it in some way, training and preparation. But I remember when I finally got there, couldn't believe I got it done. And I remember standing on stage after I won, I thought, wow, all that hard work, it really, really paid off. And it took a lot of work. And now going into Miss Universe, it's going to be that, but more amplified, intensified times a million.
Do you have those? There's those nightmare clips, and every time I see them, I just feel so bad for the people involved. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
At pageants, if you say "and such as," everybody knows what you're talking about. Do you have to level up on? Do you have to form opinions or positions on things like world hunger, or maybe even some hotter potatoes than that?
For me, I've always been political. Even before I got into pageants, I've always been very open about what I stand for. And for me, I just want to make sure I don't offend anyone as well, right? You got to be respectful of other people's opinions. But that's something you have to prepare for, is being able to be a voice. And, for me, when I was on stage at Miss Universe Canada, I felt really at ease. I felt calm. I was not nervous whatsoever. A lot of people don't know this, but an hour before the pageant started, everyone was getting their hair and makeup done, and I was already ready. And I went into the theater by myself. There was nobody in there. I think just a couple behind the scenes guys. There was nobody in the crowd, and girls were already done practicing on stage. I went and stood on the stage, and I stood in that spot where you would if you were to make it that far and make the speech. And I envisioned and kind of manifested what I would say and how I would say it and how powerful I would express myself. And then when it did get to that point in the pageant, and I prayed up there too to my mushum and my kuka, my grandparents, when it got to that point in the pageant, I was I was already here. I already did this. I feel calm and at ease. Now it's just being myself. And with answering questions, I just answer it honestly. I never prepare. I'm you might as well just answer it with an open heart and who you are, because that's how it comes across. Because if you prepare, then you sound rehearsed. You don't sound like a real person. And I'm like, I want to be a real person. I'm like, you ask me a question, I'll give you an honest answer.
I like that. You say you've always been political.
Yeah.
Would you ever consider a career in politics?
I don't know. I feel like pageantry is like politics in a way.
Probably a ton of
in a
politics
sense it can
involved.
be, yeah. But it's about how you use this platform, right? Like for me, I could have just called it a day, celebrated at home, but for me, I try to use it in a way where I'm actually going to reach people, actually going to make a big difference and change. Because, you know, when you get these titles, these opportunities, I'm like, use it to your advantage instead of just sitting there and being a pretty face. I'm like, what can this face do? How can this face like reach people? What can she do? What is her power? To me, I'm like, my voice is my power. I'm like, yeah, I can do all these other things, but I'm like, my voice is my power. And having this title, people want to listen. So I'm like, I'm going to make them listen.
Yeah. So was this always kind of, I mean, you can't plan on winning something.
No.
But was this always part of the plan? Like, do you have in the back of your mind, I want to talk a bit about your movie career, which is taking off. You have a book. You just signed a book deal. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
That's a huge deal. Was this an important part of that, like of continuing to build this platform, continuing to develop this audience, you might call it?
Oh yeah, I'm always a woman with a plan. I'm a woman on a mission. You know, I feel like if I create something for myself, I try to plan out, what am I going to do? What's the opportunity it's going to create for other people? Because yes, I love to focus on my goals, but this is so much bigger than me. Like, this is like not just representing Indigenous people, it's all Canadians, all the people that relate to me in some way. And I can make a huge stance on so many issues, like murdered and missing Indigenous women. I didn't have to talk about that at the pageant, but I used that opportunity to voice those concerns. And now so many people are talking about it. And to have the reaction I had at the pageant from people who were in the crowd that didn't even know what Indigenous women were dealing with, people were crying and they resonated with it, and they thought, oh my God, if that were to happen to like my family member, I could never imagine. So to get the conversation going is really powerful, and I'm just gonna do as much as I can.
That's phenomenal. Number one. Number two, does it come with a certain pressure? I mean, and if so, I have to imagine that it does. How do you manage that?
Yeah, there's a lot of pressure being in the public eye and people expecting a lot of me, or people having certain opinions about, oh, she's not living the way her life I want her to, you know? And for me, I always focus on if it's making me happy, that's most important. There's always going to be haters or criticizers or people that want to say something, but I'm like, if I feel like I'm walking a good path, then that's all that matters. Like, I always just brush it off my shoulders. If people got something negative to say, I'm like, well, you're not paying my bills. I'm like, you're not paying my bills. I'm like, if you're holding me back, then, you know, you're in the way. I'm like, you're not a part of my team. You know, I always want to be around people that want to push and amplify me and like help me rise. That's how I am with other people too. So I'm like, if you are holding me back, then like you're in the way.
Is that something that you had to develop?
Yes, I did not get this strong right off the bat.
Did you get burned on the way up ever?
Oh yeah, multiple times, like in different industries. It doesn't matter what, like, you know, even my work now, like people that I've worked with have burned me. People have tried to use me or use me to their advantage, and you know, I've had to get some really thick skin from that, especially in a professional career. Like, people you think you're close to will try to take the most advantage of you, which is crazy. But for me, I have to always stay focused and make sure that I'm safe in every situation and that I'm still doing a good job at what I do.
No kidding. Hey, talk to us about the Great Salish Heist. I know you're super excited about this because your face lights up when we bring it up.
It's the first ever Indigenous heist film. It's been picked up in how many different film festivals. I did a whole bunch of press week for it. And so it's about, I don't want to give too much away, but stealing back Indigenous artifacts rightfully where they belong. And it talks about our culture and how we intertwine in the passion and the power for it. I don't want to give too much away, but my character, she's not that funny. She's more serious. I was like, but she's great. She does some great things. But yeah, there's a really heavy relationship between these two characters, and I feel like it's a really good human interest story. It's a lot of laughter. So I think when people see it, it's a lot of Indigenous humor, but it relates to everybody. It doesn't matter what your background is. Like, it is so funny. It was hard for me to film that show, like to be around everyone. They're so funny, and my character is like very serious, but it was amazing. And now I get to go to the Hollywood Film Festival. I get to watch it at the Chinese theater. So like, it's really blowing up. And I honestly like am so like impressed with it.
I know what I'm saying is obvious, but you go to these big film festivals, you'll be down in California, you're down where everything's happening, and it's one thing, and it's very exciting. My brother's an actor, his wife's an actor. It's very exciting when you're part of something big and you're walking the red carpet, but then you have these added layers now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you're also Miss Universe Canada. You were also in the Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue. You've also got all of these other things happening, and it's just like, I just feel like as much as you're accomplishing, you kind of also get the sense that it's just the beginning. Do you feel the same way?
Yeah, I feel like once I do something, it like opens a door to something else right away.
Mm-hmm.
And now with this, winning this title, one of my biggest dreams I've always wanted, I'm like, who knows what's next? Because already my phone's blowing up, my agents are getting all these calls. I'm like, it is the beginning. But it's crazy when people ask me, what do you do for a living? I'm like, I wear many hats.
Yeah, what do you say? How do you describe yourself?
It's so hard. I'm like, oh, do I got to explain it like my bio, like actress, model, motivational speaker, television host. I'm like writer. I'm like, I do Miss Universe Canada. I'm going to Miss Universe. So
I'd put that right at
I
the
think
top
right
right
at the
now.
top, I'm like, I'm actually going to Miss Universe and representing our nation on the international stage.
Incredible.
No big deal.
No big deal. That's so cool. Why was it important for you to write a book?
It's important to share what's more on like that's not on the surface. Like I feel like people, they judge a book by its cover. They always judge me. They see me right away. They see my accomplishments and they're like, oh, it was easily handed to her. She didn't have to work that hard. I have a lot of people that judge me and think that I didn't have a hard life, but I want people to know the truth about my resilience that runs through my blood and about the adversity I had to overcome because, growing up, living through poverty and abuse, that really shaped me. It really kind of progressed me in a way where I don't want to live like that anymore. It kind of gave me that push of like what kind of life I want for myself and what kind of life I want for kids that are around me that I work with. So that lifestyle, that I'm going to be sharing, but also everything that I had to overcome, all the barriers, because it's hard as a woman already, but as an Indigenous woman, I had to fight so hard to be in so many different spaces. The sports world, acting, modeling, pageants, all these places, everyone has told me, someone has told me, you don't belong here. Like it doesn't matter. Like it's because of how I look, my background, and I've always had to like lift my chin up and be like, you belong wherever you want to belong. So that mentality and that like, well, why not? Why can't I? And to be the first, like, took so long, but it's like the most important thing is knowing I'm not the last. Like, yeah, kicking that door open for others, that's really important to me. So in my book, I'm going to be sharing like all the barriers, the adversity, all the behind the scenes no one gets to see because everyone thinks like, oh, want a crown, that's easy. No, you didn't see the process. You didn't see how I had to grow, the tears, everything that I went through to overcome to become who I am now. So I'm going to be, very open, and I want to be that way because it's important for women to speak their voice and speak their truth because a lot of us are silenced. And if I speak up, another woman will feel encouraged to do the same.
That's amazing. The first time that you were on the show with us, we talked a little bit more in depth about your childhood and about some of this really significant adversity that you did overcome. Was there like one person? Was it community? Like when you look back to that little girl and then you look now, like where did the road out or the road up begin? Where did that start? Was it one person that showed faith in you or one person that sort of elevated the way that they were treating you above everybody else?
It was when we escaped that lifestyle and we came back home to Enoch, the reserve that I'm from. When we came back, my Cookum and Mushum, my grandparents are medicine man and medicine woman. They're the ones that taught me everything. And they're the ones that said, to push myself into my culture was going to save me. So my Cookum and having the sweat lodge there and ceremonies, that saved my life. So that's why culture is so important. And when people talk about intergenerational trauma in residential schools, that's how badly it affected like the next generations. Like I could have not been here right now. Like the last residential school closed in 1996. I qualified to go there for grade 1. Like that's insane.
That's wild to think about.
So it's like I could have not been in this position right now, but my culture is the thing that saved me, and it's the thing that kept me on path and kept me focused, and being in community helped me because being in the city, it was hard. I didn't know myself. I didn't see anyone that looked like me, and being in community where everyone's pretty much almost your cousins, like you're almost related to everybody, that made me feel safe. So being around my own people was kind of gave me that push, like, here we go. But it was actually the first time I competed in a pageant is when I got that push from community. And they weren't even people that were from my community. I'll give you a quick little gist. But when I first competed for this pageant, Miss Universe Canada, was 14 years ago when I was 20 years old. And I didn't know anything about the pageant world. I was going in just completely like blind, didn't know the prep, didn't know how much it cost, didn't know the sponsors, the training. I went in and I remember I was the only Indigenous woman competing that year, and I experienced a lot of hate from the media. Wow. A Toronto newspaper in 2010 wrote an article. They wrote, "There's an Indigenous woman competing this year. I wonder what she's going to do for her talent. Is she going to chug Lysol or sign welfare checks with her toes?" And they printed my picture next to that. And that back then was okay, which is not, but that was printed. And I remember I felt so broken because when people see it in print next to it, they think it's true. And I remember girls were like leaving out the article for me to see just to make me feel less than. And I felt really broken and alone because everyone was saying like, this is who she is and that's what she represents. And I was like, that's not who I am. And I remember I was feeling really alone on finals day, and I made top 5, and that was already the farthest a Native woman has ever gone, still from 14 years ago, and now I came back. But I made top 5, and I remember people were chanting my name, and I got second runner up. But it was after the pageant, I remember like during when they were chanting my name, I heard drums and women trilling, singing like we do. And I was like, I think I'm going crazy. I was like, I think I'm going crazy because I was feeling really down. But I remember I said, lift your chin up. You belong wherever you want to belong. And after that pageant was over, I remember all these Native people came up to me at the stage. And I was like, who are these people? Because I'm from Alberta. I'm from here. I'm not from Ontario where that pageant was being held at the time. And all these Native people from around Ontario, from different reserves, came there to that pageant. They came up to me and they said, we saw the article. And I was just like, oh God, like, oh. And they're like, but we want to let you know that like, you're never alone. Your people always have your back. You're never alone. And that like made me cry. And to like hear the drums and the trilling, like that gives you power. Culture gives you strength. It gives you power. And when that happened, I thought like, yeah, I'm never alone. There's always someone looking up to me, always someone watching and encouraging me and supporting me, even if it's quietly. So that lit a fire under my, I don't want to swear, under my booty, under my ass. It lit a fire under my ass, and I've been going since. And that was 14 years ago. So to come back and be in that space and also be recognized and not go through that, it was a completely different experience from the media this time, so for me to go back and still hold my head high after going through something like that and make history and be the first, that it blows my mind still. But I'm glad I held on and I kept that strength.
Absolutely incredible. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
And thank you for being here today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
I know for Johnny and I, we were excited just for a chance to congratulate you in person.
Yeah, of course.
And I got to crown you guys. I'm so happy.
Yeah, that's right.
Before Ashley goes, do we want to play a little snippet of her at Miss Universe?
That would be amazing. Why don't we hear that?
Yeah.
Tell us what this feels like for you to see this. Check this out.
Oh, my goodness.
Welcome our next contestant, Ashley.
Ashley, the stage is yours. Good luck.
Thank you. Imagine your daughter, your sister, or your mother went missing, and nobody cared to look for them. This is the heartbreaking reality for Indigenous women in our country. Indigenous women in Canada are 6 times more likely to experience violence or go missing. Since the national inquiry has been released, there has been no positive change to protect our women from violence. The government needs to prioritize legitimate resources and also equal accessibility for women like myself to feel protected and safe. Because I envision a Canada where women are all treated equally, we are valued and respected, because I myself am a survivor of domestic abuse. But I hope and aim to be a beacon of hope and a transformational leader so all women can use their voice to rise for those who are being silenced. Because, our unity is our fortress and all our lives matter. Thank you.
I'm so glad I got to do that, because we were given the opportunity to have 5 different topics, and we were given them right before the pageant. And one of the topics was violence against women. So that's the one that I chose, and you can make it into anything that you want. And I wanted to talk about, exactly what our women are dealing with. And when I raised my opinion about that, everyone was just kind of like blown away, and they felt, I don't know, not just sympathetic, but that relatability, being able to relate, like, yeah, what if it was one of your family members? It doesn't matter what her background is. That relatability of that understanding, like, this is so impactful. Like, we don't want to lose our women. So yeah, it was really important for me to say that and speak my voice. And I'm just one of those people. I'm like opportunist, like I take that opportunity to speak my truth and use it to my advantage.
If opportunist can be used as a compliment, sure, but you are creating opportunities for yourself and inspiring. You should see our live chat. I mean, if you're worried about haters, people are huge fans of yours in our live chat. Like, I just saw, like, Kathy was like, I'm so glad she's here. Sharon just said, what an inspiration. I mean, people going on, because I feel like a lot of people sort of like, I don't know, people have sort of watched you come up, and a lot of people are just very proud of you. They feel like they've been part of this journey.
It took time, like a lot of people are like, oh, why did this happen? I'm like, well, it didn't happen overnight. Like, I've been doing this for a long time. I started my first pageant 14 years ago, started acting 14 years ago. I'm like, I feel like Edmonton's watching me grow up.
There's that hockey metaphor again. Yeah. This is when the veteran gets to hoist the cup and everybody gets super excited about it, right?
Exactly what it is. I'm like committed to the team, man.
Yeah,
bringing the cup home, the crown home.
Bringing the crown home, wearing the C. You can learn more about what Ashley's doing. I mean, I would say just join the 2 million other people and follow her on Instagram at Ashley Callingbull. She's also at ashleycallingbull.com. And listen, we obviously want to welcome you back to the show as often as your schedule permits. We didn't even talk about your new TV show. There's a lot of other ground to cover, but in that meantime, we'll be looking ahead to November, to Miss Universe. We will be cheering you on. And if I can just speak on behalf of this entire community, everybody's so proud of you. Thank you for doing this.
Oh, thank you, man.
You got it.
And
there's a federal cabinet minister about to come on. So
I'm going to go grill him now.
You can go. What you really need to do?
I'll prep you.
Go talk to the staffers, and then you tell the staff, and I'll have Minister Miller in here. And
give him the pageant question.
That's right. That's right. Ashley Callingbull, thanks for doing this.
Thank you.
Again, ashleycallingbull.com. Miss Universe Canada 2024. Unbelievable stuff. This conversation has been presented by Real Talk partners like our friends at California Closets. I got to get you set up with a California Closet. They could do like a custom lighting bit for that crown. That would be unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. Ashley, I'll put in a word for you. They'll get in touch with you. CaliforniaClosets.ca is where absolutely anybody can request a free consultation. Talk to their design team, and then the next crew you'll meet is the installers. This is the team that makes sure that you're making the most out of your space with their custom organizational systems. But again, that first conversation, that design strategy conversation, that's all free. No risk to you. CaliforniaClosets.ca is where you can get that started. Our friends at Friesen Brothers have you covered this weekend. If you're going to be barbecuing, make sure you have quality Alberta protein on that grill. Their butchers, their real Alberta butchers, are offering the finest cuts of Alberta beef, bison, pork, chicken, turkey, you name it. It's barbecue season at Friesen Brothers. You can learn more about what they're offering up, plus get some great recipe ideas on their website. That's Friesen.com. And at Kubi Renewable Energy, they're helping grow Canada's green energy footprint. They're Western Canada's busiest solar installer, proudly operating out of Calgary, Edmonton, Lethbridge, and Kamloops, BC. You can check out the work they're doing online at kubienergy.ca. That's also where you'll find their careers link. If you're an electrician, an installer, a salesperson, an office manager, they'd love to talk to you. They're building their team at kubienergy.ca. Joined in studio by the Honourable Marc Miller. He's Canada's Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship, formerly Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations. How much of a force of nature is Ashley Callingbull?
Oh, God. I don't know how we follow up on...
I don't think we can. I think we need to start a new chapter, a new page.
20,000 followers on Instagram or something.
Dude, I have 12. So I was like, when I moved from 11 to 12,000 followers, I almost threw a party, and she's got 2 million.
It was so upbeat. I mean, look, I before this portfolio that I got a year ago to the date, almost, I was the Minister of Indigenous Affairs in 2 portfolios for about 4 years, and the way she effortlessly talks about these really, really difficult issues, MMIWG is is a shameful legacy, and with the impact that it has today on young girls, on Indigenous women. The way she talks about it is effortlessly is incredible, and the level of ignorance in Canadian society, non-Indigenous peoples, is just is still staggering, even among very well informed people and analysts and even journalists. It's still something that we need strong levels of education across the country on, and people like her are indispensable to that narrative.
Has the federal government, in your assessment, has your portfolio made meaningful strides in that area, do you think, in the last 10 years?
We've made some, and we've made significant investments in a number of areas, making sure women are safe, but we still have a lot to go. There is, you just see the horrifying stories, for example, in Winnipeg with the search for missing women in landfill, Indigenous women treated like garbage. This is Canada. It's real, and it's not isolated to Canada. I had discussions with my American counterpart, who herself is Indigenous, and they're a step behind us, and they are just sort of scratching the surface of that devastating legacy in America, and they haven't had a national inquiry into it. So we all have a lot of work to do, not limited to our country, but we've got a lot of work here to do at home.
Are you, I can't use the word satisfied, but let me ask you how you feel about the time that has passed since the conclusion, since that report, the 94 calls to action were presented, this Truth and Reconciliation Commission. A lot of Canadians might make a pretty compelling argument that we've seen these calls to action, but very few have actually been acted upon. What's your assessment?
When you dig into the calls themselves, they call for broad societal changes, whether it's the Truth and Reconciliation Commission or the final report into murdered missing Indigenous women and girls. The $40+ billion settlement and investment into child welfare reform is significant, but that change happens over a generation, making communities more secure, making sure we're putting investments into water and education. We've made some of the most significant investments into the Indigenous reality, Indigenous communities in Canada than any other government in the past. But there's still a lot of work to go, and it's not for a guy like me to sit back and start patting ourselves on the back, because there's still people suffering today, and there's still work to do. This is going to take a long time, and it's going to take successive investments by governments, regardless of their political color. We shouldn't have this as a political ball that you juggle. It should be an investment by all Canadians, and not simply the political class, but kids that are learning it in school. The one bright thing that I see is that my kids have learned that in school, whereas I didn't. So change is happening. It's slow, frustratingly slow for those that are suffering from it, but there is change in Canada, and I think compared to the rest of the world, which I don't like to do, we are significantly ahead than other countries that probably should be making those investments as well.
You did an interview recently in Ottawa where you commented on Canada experiencing waves of anti-immigrant sentiment. Is Canada experiencing one of those waves right now in your estimation? And if so, what do you think is driving it?
Well, I think a lot of things, right? Breaking it down is probably a much longer conversation, but we are a country that is integrated with America, with the rest, with countries that we compare ourselves to in Europe. There are political parties and classes that have made a ton of capital off the backs of immigrants. We are seeing waves of irregular migration, mass displacement in record numbers around the world, and scenes out of Europe that seem very commonplace, scenes that you see in the U.S. about immigrants moving from the Mexican border into the U.S. We're not immune to that political narrative. We're not immune to the waves and the sentiments that people have towards immigration. Although, to our credit, we don't have any major party that is anti-immigrant. And I think that's something that we need to conserve. But it takes a lot of work that we've built carefully over the last few decades, a consensus that immigration is positive. Indeed, it's been responsible for almost 100% of the net entrance into the workforce. It's been responsible for a vast majority of our growth and our gross domestic product, but it hasn't come without challenges. We've made our workforce younger, which is what the Bank of Canada has told us we should do. And compared to other countries, we're doing relatively well. But that's come with challenges in and around affordability. Now, it's not immigrants that have caused the rise in the interest rates. There are volumes that impact affordability in certain parts of the country. And that's something that Canadians look to us to get under control. And when we have a system sometimes that is overheated, it's one that Canadians rightfully expect us to get a grip on. And I think when you break down sort of the discussion between what's going on at the border, what's happening with the immigration system, and the discussion on immigration generally, I think you can have some pretty rational conversations about where the direction of the country should be. If we have a labor force that needs to get young with all these people that are aging out, and the retiree ratio to worker is closer to 3-to-1 and even 2-to-1 soon, as opposed to 7-to-1 when I was born in 1973. That's a problem if we want all those social services that we've prided and made our national identity on. We need people working. But that comes with challenges. We need to build houses. We need to make sure the education system can accommodate these people. And once in a while, we have to look at those volumes coming in and see if they are the right measure for the country that we're trying to build.
In your estimation, in the context of the housing crunch in particular, do you think that in retrospect over the past number of years, as Canada has ramped up immigration levels quite a bit higher than in previous years, let's say in the last 5, is Canada at a point right now where the nation, the federal government, needs to reevaluate immigration policy and how many new Canadians are coming into this country every year?
Yeah, I think we always have to look at the proper calibration and how. I think one of the things that is quite obvious when we see these volumes and we establish permanent residency numbers every year, which is a statutory exercise I have to do. I have to go in front of Parliament and give numbers on how many permanent residents are coming to the country. We have to say to ourselves, is that the right mix? And who we consult with, consulting with provinces and territories. I'm doing a whole bunch of consultations today on those numbers. Do we need more? Do we need less? I think that's a constant adjustment that we need to look at. Are we getting the right kinds of people in the country for the right jobs? That is always an important consideration. 60% of our immigration is economically driven. Only 25% of that is true in the United States. The other 20% is very important family reunification that builds family units in Canada. And the other 20% is humanitarian. So there's always a pull and push with those. I meet chambers of commerce. I haven't heard one chamber of commerce saying reduce the immigration levels. But we are at a level where we are stabilizing those numbers, and we always have to take a look at the needs that provinces express to us for their labor markets. And I just came back from the Northwest Territories where they're saying we need actually more immigrants to actually keep businesses open. That may not be the same in downtown Toronto, so we have to get that mix right.
Yeah, and it's interesting for us too as well. Obviously, you have more of a Western Canadian audience here, but we've had some fascinating conversations, and I always appreciate hearing from people on the ground, people in industry, people that are walking, these paths and can say this is what it looks like in our business or in our industry. And you hear from a lot of people that say we rely, for example, on temporary foreign workers a ton because we can't find other workers and we can't do our jobs, we can't grow our business without them. And then you'll hear from folks that'll say temporary foreign workers are taking jobs from Canadians. You'll hear people that are advocating for temporary foreign workers saying they're being underpaid and exploited. I mean, I'm not saying that across the board, right, but in some circumstances you see it. It's obviously something that if you're working in an industry that is affected by this, it's all over your radar. And maybe if you're a bit insulated from it, like other Canadians, it's not something that people are thinking about. But in your portfolio in particular, what work is the federal government doing to reevaluate or to take a closer look at how Canada approaches temporary foreign workers?
Well, one, giving Canadians a better snapshot of what temporary foreign workers look like in this country. The impression most people have is that that's people working in the fields or in the food transformation area, whether it's meat or fish. That's only sort of 10% of the snapshot of what the temporary foreign worker bucket looks like in Canada. We've sort of gotten addicted to temporary foreign workers in Canada. We've gone from a couple percentage points of the population to 5 to 7%, almost 7% of the population right now. But that's composed of a very interesting bucket of people. There is a huge humanitarian aspect to that. 300,000 Ukrainians that we have welcomed because of the war of aggression that Russians leveled on Ukraine. As part of our adjusting our levels, we would never attempt to send those people back. It would be cruel and heartless. We've also increased in some areas, whether it's the hospitality sector, whether it's postgraduate work permits for students, whether it's students that are here that are counted as temporary as part of that. Those have jumped significantly in the last 3 or 4 years. And when it comes to international students and the postgraduate work permits that comes with them, that's something that's gotten overheated. And it was time to pump the brakes a bit and bring those levels down. We have a number of adjustments that we need to make. The Bank of Canada has signaled as much. I think that we all agree that we don't want to treat these people as vehicles of cheap foreign labor that is disposable. For some of those folks, there should be a proper pathway to permanent residency and indeed citizenship. And for others, the need to get that experience from Canada and return to the country that they came to. We've signaled that in the next 3 years, we want to reduce the levels that are currently at 6.7, 6.8% to 5%. It's going to take a lot of work when you issue a work permit for a 3-year period. You can't just turn off the tap entirely and expect it to go to 0%. It will take some time. So the adjustments right now, Ryan, have to be well done, because otherwise we jeopardize really important sectors of the economy. In an era of food inflation, you want to be very careful in making sure that people have the proper labor to make sure that work can get done. So I want to be very, very careful in the adjustments that we announce to the market, and make sure that provinces have a really important voice in making sure, and stakeholders have a really important voice in making sure that their industry and economy is protected.
Leger poll shows, a recent poll, that 60% of Canadians feel that too many immigrants are coming to Canada. So a majority of Canadians feel that way. You're on the record as saying that you believe that immigration could be a top or the top election issue. What would the ballot box question be? If immigration was the top election issue, what would the question be?
That's really good. I think if I knew the top election question and I was posing it to you, I'd either be stupid to tell you or lying. So, every political guru goes around and says this is going to be the top political question. I think immigration generally, I think the levels and how we are doing a good job or not will probably be a matter of debate. I don't know if it'll be the top question. We are often surprised by issues. The 2015 election, we had the horrific visuals of Aileen Curdy washed up on European shores, and that was an important polarizing aspect of the election. We've had the evacuation of Kabul as a topic for the first 2 weeks of the last election. So that's something that could happen. You could always have surprises, but they become immigration themed. I do think this is an important topic. Canadians increasingly are focused on this issue. The sentiments in the polls that you see are often quite nuanced. Often Canadians, when you dig into those numbers, to the extent the polls go into that level of granularity, are still very positive about immigration, but they don't want it done in an uncontrolled way. And in a way that doesn't make sense for the economy. No one's saying you do have racism in this country, but I wouldn't ascribe that to all the sentiment and some of the head scratching that you're seeing about the volumes that were coming in. Those discussions that I have around the Christmas table with my relatives, those play themselves out on scale, and you have a range of differing views. And I think we have to be open enough as a country to have rational discussions about these things and not fall into sort of political dogmatism.
Have you decided whether or not you'll seek re-election?
Oh, I will 100%.
Yeah, 100%?
Yeah.
You're you're like childhood friends with the Prime Minister, right? You guys have known each other since you were teenagers or something like that?
Yeah, we met in 1984. We both went to the same Jesuit high school in Quebec.
So you were 11 when you met?
I was 11, yeah.
Yeah, so you've known this guy a long time.
Absolutely.
Do you think that he will lead your party into the next election? Does he still have the confidence of cabinet?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I
100%?
I think he's in it to win it. I think he's psyched. I've never seen him this hungry, at least in a long time. There's a couple things about the Prime Minister that I guess people don't appreciate as much. He loves his country, that people know, but he doesn't like bullies. And I think the guy like Pierre Poilievre, who I've been very open about my feelings about the way he behaves and his attitude, is fundamentally a bully. And I think that's something that motivates the Prime Minister. You can't always be in it to beat the other guy. You have to show a vision to Canadians and why you love your country. And I think that's why the Prime Minister's in. I think he's best to lead our party. That's less important as to why he's important to lead our country. And we've made a lot of important moves in the last 8 or 9 years. Those are the record. That's the record that we run on. Some people may not like it, but I think we offer the best choice to Canadians for the future.
Minister, you got meetings today, so we got to let you go. But I want to ask you this in closing: the 26th of July, with firefighters still working the Jasper blaze. We talked to Alberta's Premier Danielle Smith from her motorcade. She's on her way to Hinton, Alberta. They're pulled over, and probably the most striking moment of that interview was the very last question. I didn't think I was going to get the answer. I did, but I asked her. I said, "This is a rebuild that will happen in a national park. So there are some unique dynamics to it. How do you as provincial leadership approach that, or how is that significant to you in any way?" And she says, basically, and I'll paraphrase, that she has reason to be concerned that, and I'll acknowledge that this probably would be Parks Canada, but I want to get the political angle on this, that there may be an initiative to shrink the footprint of Jasper National Park, or to shrink the footprint of development in Jasper National Park as part of this rebuild. And she says, so that's why we're motivated to be a part of this process. So people can check out that interview. That's the 26th of July. We talked to Alberta's Premier. Has there been any discussion around the cabinet table, any discussion in caucus? Have you heard any buzz or any indication that there may be an initiative like this to shrink the industrial, commercial, residential, or physical footprint of human activity in Jasper National Park?
Not that I've heard of. I think the focus right now should be on getting people home safe and getting those fires under control and hopefully out. All that stuff is wild speculation. We want to get that place rebuilt. It's a beautiful place. People are evacuated. I just want to see them safe in their homes and feeling better about where they are. So let's focus on that. And I think when it comes to the national park, there's always, national parks have stringent rules. People have been living in them for ages, and we should be as flexible, I think, as we can to make sure that people are home and safe and that the fire's out.
Marc Miller is Canada's Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship in Alberta, speaking with stakeholders. We appreciate you making time for Real Talk. Thanks for coming by the studio.
Thank you.
You got it. This conversation is presented by our friends at Athabasca University. You can check out their website, athabascau.ca, to learn more about the AU Advantage. And what is that advantage? Well, number one, world-class accredited online degrees and courses so you can complete your education wherever and whenever it works for you. They've also got great initiatives for student support, in particular with things like transfer credits. Maybe you did some schooling prior. You'd like to make sure you don't have to do that work over again. Plus tuition and fees, including financial aid and awards. You can open your options with the online offerings at Athabasca University. More than 50,000 program and course alumni from over 100 countries. More than 92% of them say they're working in a job related to their field of study. Unbelievable stuff. Learn more about what makes AU unique by visiting athabascau.ca. I am so grateful that we have these next three locked and loaded right now.
I was just going to say.
I love shows like this, don't you?
And great questions. I mean, when he came on today, I thought, is he going to ask him? Is he going to go to him about immigration? Because that was the thing I wanted to hear him talk about. And it's like housing and immigration are handcuffed together. And I like how you went in on a few questions on that. And I know we're going to do some clips for our fans.
Yeah.
Because that's really, I think he's right. I think it's going to be one of the biggest talking points of the election. I think it's a tall order for Trudeau or whoever takes his place if that happens. But I mean, it's a catch-22, Ryan. We need more houses, but we don't have enough skilled workers. How do we get them? We need immigration, but people don't want more immigration because then we need more. It's a circle.
Yeah, 100%, and very well said. You talk to a lot of people that work in industry, a lot of people that work in hiring, headhunters and the like, and they say, informed immigration, strategic immigration is an integral part to any country's economic success.
I'm sure these guys will have something
Let's get to that. I know, I can't wait. I love situations like this where we have two of the smartest people we know, and then one of their buddies. They are the co-hosts of one of Canada's most popular political podcasts. They are the Strategists, Zain Velji, Stephen Carter, and Corey Hogan. Guys, we're getting to you late. Thanks for hanging tight. We just had a lot
noticed,
to talk. Yeah,
we're
getting to you
and
just
one
a
out of
tiny
the three of
little
us,
bit
the
late.
one with the least amount of talent, is very pissed about it. So you can figure out who that is, and we'll let him speak right now.
Go ahead. Hey, what do you guys make of what Marc Miller was saying about immigration? Number one, do you buy or forecast that immigration could be a top election issue, Carter?
Well, I'll tell you something. I'd be stupid to tell you if I did know. So,
you're working right now on becoming a campaign manager, and you don't want to
I'll
show your cards?
I'll tell you what I'm going to do. This entire interview is going to be comprised of Marc Miller quotes, and you're going to love it. You're going to love it.
It started with that one, didn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You think that immigration is this front of mind for Canadians, though, for real? Like, is this the number one election issue right now?
Listen, if it was, I'd be stupid to tell you. I mean, it's impossible for anybody to tell you what an election issue is going to be months before the election, which might be, I'm just throwing it out there, guys. Maybe you guys will have my back on this. It might be one of the reasons that Justin Trudeau is getting his ass handed to him, is that he doesn't know what an actual election issue might look like in this particular election. So I'm throwing it out there. Just an idea.
He says he says that the Prime Minister has 100% support of the cabinet. Zain, did you believe it when he said it?
No. But, at the end of the day, if we talk about the question at the core of it, could immigration be an election issue? Absolutely, it can, and perhaps not the way that the Liberals want it to be. I think that's the most interesting part about it, is that the Liberal framework on immigration has been consistent and has been very, very entrenched for the last number of years. And the fact is, the lack of any sort of pivot or even baseline understanding from the Liberals on immigration. Sure, it can be an election issue, just not the way that Marc Miller is going to want it to be, unfortunately. And that political nativism that we've seen in the U.S. creeping up here is not even something that I'm predicting. It's something that's already here. So the Liberals need to be aware of how they want to position immigration. I still think that morally and virtuously, they're on the right side of the issue, if you can call it that. But that really doesn't matter when you're dealing with the raw politics of a populace that is trying to figure out how they get ahead and have been positioned with the politician on the other side that calls Canada a zero-sum game in many ways, and immigration's at fault of that.
But Corey, yet Miller doesn't go like full hand grenades at Pierre Poilievre. I mean, he called him a bully in that interview that you just saw, but he also said Canada doesn't have a party that's anti-immigration or anti-immigrant. He didn't go so far as to say that, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Yeah, well, like two things there. First of all, real loser tactic to say the other guy's a bully. That just makes you look weak. So I'm not really sure that's the energy the Liberals want to bring. But that leads into my second comment here. They're not in control of the agenda. None of the parties seem to be on immigration. To Zain's particular point, American politics does manage to creep its way up here. And you're seeing it pollute our politics in that sense, because we do have a political party consensus on immigration. The political parties all feel the same way about immigration, but the public is now drifting away from support of immigration. And so that's really interesting in its own right. And he, of course, chose his words very carefully to say no major party. And I assume he's ignoring the People's Party of Canada. Rightly so. They're not doing very well in the polls, but there are voices out there outside of the the parliament that are saying there are too many immigrants in this country. So definitely a storyline to watch in this country.
Well, I think that Leger poll is pretty telling, that 60% of Canadians feel like too many immigrants are coming to Canada. I mean, 60% is no laughing. That's a majority opinion.
That's a consensus in any kind of universe, right? And to be fair to 60% of Canadians, it's really hard to buy a home right now. There are a lot of signs that there are more people than there are places to put people in Canada. And so it's pretty natural to say, well, you got a supply and demand mismatch here, right? Yeah, we want to have more houses, but maybe we have too many people looking for houses too.
Yeah.
You know what frustrates me, Jespo, on this is that the Liberals, while I agree, at least from my personal take, that they might be on the right side of history with immigration. They're doubling down on the fact that this is a country of immigrants. We need more people here. We need a critical mass to create economic prosperity. We need to double down on diversity and multiculturalism in a world that is starting to reject it. I believe all of that. The issue is no one is telling the story. What fundamentally frustrates me about the Liberals is that they feel like they've got the right policy, which I agree that they do, but they don't want to have a stirring defense of it. They're spending, and they have spent very little time, historically speaking, and this is where I think we're probably in this situation right now, of having a stirring, moving, persuasive, joyful, exciting defense of immigration. And when you don't have that and you just put the policy out and you say it speaks for itself because history and legacy and tradition and consensus, the public doesn't buy that as a soaring defense. The public isn't persuaded by that, especially in this moment. So what frustrates me here is not to say that this narrative and this question was entirely preventable, but the fact is the Liberals spent such little time putting together any sort of defense or offense on immigration, which allowed the file to erode from a public opinion support, less to Corey's point around a political consensus support, because political consensus does not matter in the face of where the population is. And so I think that's a lesson for progressives. I think it's a lesson the Democrats have taken, and I think it's a real interesting example of how something like this happens right in front of us, where something a lot of us support gets eroded very quickly because the side that supports it just thinks the policy will speak for itself, and it doesn't.
Justin's in our live chat as we're talking to the strategists. He says calling a spade in saying that Pierre Poilievre is a bully, it's plain as day in everything he says. Corey, if it's a loser tactic or a loser strategy, what's the winning tactic?
Listen, the cool guy at school, to continue the metaphor, wasn't sitting there complaining about the bully. The cool guy at school was impervious to the bully. The bully's effects didn't work at all on it. The problem is he's playing Pierre Poilievre's game the minute he's saying, oh, he's being mean. He's being mean to me. He's being mean to people like me. And what the Liberals need to do is push their own agenda. And the three of us, and we have a little group chat here, our heads were popping off when he said, if I knew the top election issue, I'd be stupid to tell you. Political parties spend a lot of time and money advertising the top issue. This is the whole point of elections. You want people to think your top issue is their top issue, and the thing that you're best at is what they should care about. And holy shit, right? Like the secret Liberal plan to win the election, that's got to be demoralizing for any Liberal out there who's watching this.
Stephen, you look like your head's about to explode.
I mean,
that's a constant.
This is one of the worst performances of a minister, and it just kind of underlines things. He's a bully. Okay, then push back. How does one defeat a bully? Push back. You give him the opportunity to say that in immigration, his issue is going to be an issue in the election. Then why wouldn't he say, I hope it's immigration. I have a great defense for immigration. I get to stand up and say that this economy is being driven by immigration. Northeast Calgary has the highest percentage of entrepreneurs in the country. Right? Why? Because we have immigrants coming who bring with them passion, ideals. We have a point-based system for immigration here. We are literally getting the best and the brightest from every country in the world. And they're sending us people who come and they land and they're ready immediately to make an economic impact in our country. Now, that comes with some costs. It comes with a housing problem. We can fix housing problem by fixing supply. Here's how we do. I want this to be an issue. I want to be strong. I want to push back against Pierre Poilievre. Instead, I run around saying, he's a bully. He's mean to me. Oh, fuck. Step up.
To Corey's point, the bully analogy implies that you're being bullied versus you're the kid in the class or the group in the broader cohort that is impervious and just looks past it. And I think the inherent implication here is that on the totem pole, we're not the popular kids or the cool kids or the party that people want to be to make it in political terms. Then there's the bully, and then there's the bullied, and we're at the bottom of said hierarchy. And I think that inherently is the problem, which is it implies that you are actually being beat up, you are actually being clobbered, you are actually being affected by the bully versus the group at the top or the groups higher than the bully. They're like, who's the bully in the school? That guy's a loser. Right, like we don't even.
The group at the top doesn't call the group at the top doesn't call the bully a bully. To your point,
doesn't even know they exist.
They're like he's a fucking prick. That guy should get fucked. By the way, are we allowed to swear? I should have checked before.
You can say whatever you want, pal.
Yeah, he's got some fucking issues. Like I've never paid 1 second of attention to that person. Versus calling them a bully, which implies you're being bullied, which then you've bought into their frame. Because bully to one is strength, power, control over you to another.
But strategically, like people listen to you because you guys run campaigns. And Zain, by the way, congratulations on Nenshi, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit. But you guys understand campaigns. And so right now, if you're advising the federal Liberals, you're going like, we're 20 points down in the polls, and everything that has worked in past kind of isn't working right now, or doesn't appear to be working anymore. So you have to try something different. You can't just keep saying, look at our track record, because it's not working. It seems like you've lost that ground, right, Carter?
Yeah, I mean, if it'd be really interesting if there was an example in the United States of someone changing their political fortune by making a significant change. If that example in the United States stands for anything of Kamala Harris becoming the leader, it does show that when you're being held back by your leader, that there is a malaise sets in, and when there's renewed energy and opportunity, all of a sudden the political landscape changes. I'm not saying that Justin Trudeau needs to go for the Liberals to change their fortunes, but I'm saying I will agree with you that what they're doing to this point isn't changing their political fortunes at all. Someone needs to come up with a strategy, and the strategy that I think that I've come up with is, yeah, they need a new leader. I just don't think they're going to get one, because Justin Trudeau, as Marc Miller indicated right there, well, by gosh, he's a fighter. He's a fighter. He's such a strong fighter that he has to complain about being bullied by Pierre Poilievre. I mean, I don't know. I don't understand how to put together all of these contradictions that the Liberals are telling themselves.
But you've got, like, so if you want to, if we can obviously start getting this conversation a little messier and blending in and blurring in some American politics, and we'll talk provincial politics in a bit as well. But the Kamala Harris thing was like so obvious, because you've got Joe Biden like forgetting where he is, unable to answer questions, simple questions about his mental acuity, and then meantime you have this stick of dynamite ready to go with 4 years of experience, very marketable. She's been the vice president. There's polling that suggests she would kick ass. I don't know that within the federal Liberal cabinet that you have, or even within that ecosystem, that you have that obvious heir apparent. Now, Kamala may not have been obvious as an heir apparent to everybody, but early signs, 200 million raised, 170,000 volunteers in her first week, indicate that it's working. Is it because there's no heir apparent that the Liberals are maybe in a special bit of trouble right now?
It's really interesting, because isn't there an heir apparent? Don't we have a deputy prime minister? I mean, obviously, all of us, I think we'd all agree she's not necessarily the heir apparent, but just to keep mixing up Canadian and American politics here, I think maybe even most Democrats were saying things like, I don't know if Kamala's the one, until Kamala was the one. And you find that sometimes a change is as good as a rest, and everybody's reinvigorated and everybody snaps to, and everybody says, hey, I guess this is what we're doing. It is really impressive the way Kamala Harris managed to consolidate her party behind her and get all of that support, but it was not a given. And I think that it was probably as likely if Joe Biden had not pointed to her and said, she's the person, and obviously in the States, she's the vice president, so that's a little easier. I don't know. I don't know if she would have been the nominee, but she consolidated everything behind her. The internet got really excited. We talked a little bit about this on our pod, but they started doing a bunch of tactics that Joe Biden had already tried online that had fallen flat months before. They just repackaged them for Kamala Harris, and they put them in her voice instead of an 81-year-old man's voice, and everybody could hear it again. And so to Stephen's point, sometimes a change of leader is it's superficial. It's not even about the substance. It's not even about the content. It's that the other person is now tuned out, and you need them to tune in again. And changing leader is not the only way to do that, but it is the most obvious way. Certainly for the Liberals, it's the most obvious way.
It's a really good point Corey makes, because there's 3 examples I can point to where they've all been tried by Biden and they have gone viral with Harris. The weird stuff this past couple of weeks feels net new. It is not. If you have something to say it to my face from a couple days ago, challenging Trump to the debate. Biden tried that. And her first campaign video where she talks about freedom, that was literally the start of Joe Biden's re-election campaign. And all 3 of these things seem fresh, innovative, exciting, exuberant because of the messenger change. I also feel like there's something else going on, which is maybe hard to define, but perhaps a lesson for the Liberals, which is that she's like part of a culture. She's part of like the broader culture there. The memification, the K-hive, the online discourse, the words that she uses, they're part of a cultural sort of like exuberance. They're part of a cultural sort of fabric. Not to make a couch meme about JD Vance, which we can talk about extensively.
Oh, jeez.
But what she represents has a connectivity, And I think the one thing the Liberals, when they look at their current bench and when they look at the Prime Minister, is if you were to ask a very simple question, which is, are any of these folks part of the culture? The answer would be, I don't know what that question means, but the answer is no. Like, the answer is actually no. And the Liberal recruitment, and this goes down to like political party building, has been so dry since 2015. The Liberals have become so liberal since 2015. They've closed the flaps to the tent. They haven't recruited the talent. They haven't created the bench inside that caucus or out, so that when we look, unlike where we looked for the Democrats, where if it wasn't Kamala, it could have been Shapiro or Moore or all these other folks, or Whitmer, who were incredible candidates. The Liberals have done an incredibly poor job of building their talent pipeline, building that second and third generation of talent within the Liberal machinery, that right now, when you ask about leader, people dismiss Chrystia Freeland, and then they go straight to a guy older than Justin Trudeau in Mark Carney, who represents more of the past than the future, one might argue, despite my personal admiration for Carney as an individual. And I think it goes back to the fact that the Liberals are escaping the culture. And you look at Pierre Poilievre, it's a different type of culture, but he's in it. He's vibing with it. Has he made some missteps with it, with crypto and other things? Absolutely. But he actually has a resonance and a frequency in the culture beyond politics like none of the Liberals do right now.
Hey, let me jump in on that for one quick second. People often say, yeah, Poilievre and crypto. Some few things have blown up in his face, like crypto. If people would have bought Bitcoin when Poilievre was talking about it, they'd be seeing like a 30% return on their investment right now. Why is everybody acting like Poilievre got owned by his crypto strategy? If anything, he proved it to be completely correct.
Well, I mean, that was 2 years ago. If they just put it in the S&P, that would also be the case.
Bitcoin's outperformed everything. I mean, whatever.
Since then, though, come on.
Carter, it's 100% true.
Is Bitcoin a sponsor, or what do you got?
Bitcoin
trying to get a new sponsor.
So here, listen.
I feel like we're getting into
I need the four of them so I can look these motherfuckers in the eyes. Bitcoin was a presenting sponsor of this show for its first 2 years, okay? And at that point, I always said to people, and I still say to people, do not take financial advice from me. Do not buy Bitcoin because you heard me talking about it. Now that that's out of the way, I'm just saying people that really believe in this as part of the future right now are looking pretty smart if they bought it a few years ago. I just don't understand why people act like it's such a bad thing for Poilievre. Yeah.
I want to answer your question from a political lens. It's one of the few things that the Liberals effectively defined about Poilievre. One of the few rare things, which was this was a speculative currency. Yes, you might be right. You would have had
currency. It's a Ponzi scheme.
It's not a Ponzi scheme, Carter. You know it's not a Ponzi scheme.
It's a Ponzi scheme.
But Jespo, the political answer is that the political answer is always the reality doesn't necessarily matter as much as the perception. This is one of the things that the Liberals were successful on the perception of, that this was a broy individual who would jump into any risky bet to win the moment. Yeah. It's one of the rare things the Liberals have been able to maybe get to stick, which is why I bring it up as an example, despite the fact base that you're mentioning, which I haven't researched and such, but I let's just say it's true, and I have no reason to believe it isn't. But I think it's a rare example of the Liberals actually succeeding on its core definition of Poilievre. One of the few that they've had success on.
Mark Carney, you mentioned. I've got, it was Curtis in the chat says he thinks federal housing minister could be a great successor. Sean Fraser. He was impressive. He's young. He's marketable. I talked to a Liberal staffer, won't say who, at Stampede, who said that they are convinced. See how I did that? Nobody's going to have any hints on who I'm talking about.
Oh, so good.
They told me they think that Francois-Philippe Champagne is a no-brainer for the next leader of the Liberals. My retort was, I'm not sure anybody in Western Canada knows who he is, but I don't know if that matters. Anita Anand's name has been bandied about. I don't know if that's. I think that Chrystia Freeland. She's always been great to the show. She's nice, great from she's from Alberta. She's accomplished. She's smart. But like I kind of feel like you guys that ship seems to have sailed, and I do think she's my gut instinct. Take it for what it's worth. Is that she's too closely tied to the Prime Minister. I just think, like you were arguing, Zain, that I think would hamper her chances. Did I miss anybody off the short list?
I almost want to make the counterpoint, and almost as a quasi question. Sorry, Jespo, I do this every single time. I just come in and just host the show. does it matter? Like, has the U.S. example shown us that change can be progress in some ways? That some sort of change can give you a bump. I'm sure on the long tail it does matter, but if you're running a 100-day sprint like Harris was, if the Liberals were to swap their leader near the end of the Trudeau prime ministership, could they get away with any of these people to maybe add a bit of resurgency to their fortunes?
It's good to have a counterpoint to Kim Campbell now, right? Kim Campbell got the last days of the Brian Mulroney tenure, and now we have a counterpoint where we can say, it really doesn't matter how long the new leader has. Maybe there's going to be a bump just because there's excitement. And the point really isn't who's going to be the leader that takes over. The point is to Marc Miller's assertion that Justin Trudeau is the guy who can lead this fight. I think that his assertions based on blind optimism and perhaps decades of friendship more than it is based on a real read of what's actually happening here on the ground in Canada.
Because we welcome audience members and guests holding our feet to the fire, I want to jump into the Real Talk live chat for some counterpoints to my Bitcoin advocacy. Leslie wonders, isn't Bitcoin incredibly harmful to the environment? I would say that it does take a lot of energy to mine Bitcoin, but maybe not as much destruction as gold mining. Just throwing that out there. James says, for the sake of all of us, Jesperson, go read a book about any point in history where a few controlled limited markets like oil, gold, or diamonds, and then talk to us again why Bitcoin is good. James, I'll do my best to read up on it. Noob Try Again says, crypto, like most things, has many pitfalls and many ne'er-do-wells involved. He says, Jespo, your episode just yesterday was all about scammers. It was. I recommend you check it out, August 1st episode. He says, they are everywhere. However, says Noob, the blockchain technology behind crypto is what has significant value. That from Noob Try Again. Hey, we could talk about swapping leaders out and whether or not it'll change a party's fortune with a very, very smooth segue into the Alberta NDP leadership race, which was won handily with a landslide, a knockout punch. I'm trying to think of the strongest possible words I can use to describe an 80+% win by the former mayor of Calgary, Naheed Nenshi. That win was engineered by one of these gentlemen here today, Zain Velji. How did you do it?
Well, in part, how did we do it? I mean, at the end of the day, it was selling memberships and, frankly, responding to the enthusiasm. The strategist answer would be a very long explanation of all the tactics, etc. But what we've realized when we launched was that the enthusiasm was there, and we just had to create the infrastructure to allow people to cash in on that enthusiasm, quite literally, to purchase their memberships. And Carter and Corey will know that often, as much as I gripe with them, if you're riding a wave and one is created, you spend less time on the engineering and you spend more time on figuring out how you funnel in all that enthusiasm, get them to do the core action that you want them to do, buy the memberships, try to get people to feel like they're part of something bigger, and then get them out to vote. And, the fun analogy I'll give you is I think Naheed Nenshi in some ways was like the McRib. There's a lot of people who love the McRib. There's a lot of people who do not like the McRib, but there's a lot of people, when the McRib is back for a limited time, you want to show up. And in this case, we need to capture that enthusiasm. We needed to build the structures in order to do that. And I feel like we did a good job putting that together, reminding people, putting them out there on their own personal GeoTV track, setting them personalized notes, saying that we're going to have a conversation that is going to put policy together with the entire team, not preemptively put it out, but that we still are a campaign of full sentences and big brains that we want you to be involved in. All these sort of things were part of it. So, I could take credit on behalf of the team, and we had an incredible team, including the candidate and all the leadership. But at the end of the day, this was folks that responded to a moment, to enthusiasm, and we wanted to create the the structures to allow that to happen.
I
now
think
Carter and Corey will take a shit on me.
Well,
for it,
yeah,
but
but yeah, I'm happy to set the table for that. I think most people know that with the McRib, it's not actually, McDonald's has not actually invested in technology to pull the bones out of baby back ribs. I think most people know it.
This analogy will haunt me, won't it?
It's ground pork. It's ground pork that has been pressed into a rib mold.
He's a Muslim candidate.
Corey,
too. This is a terrible
analogy. Does the Alberta NDP, much like the McRib, have to push Naheed Nenshi into the Rachel Notley mold to really give the NDP a fighting chance in what should be a competitive provincial election the next time Albertans go to the polls, or is this legitimately an entire new look party? Is that the message they're selling?
What a seamless metaphor.
Thank you, buddy. Thank you very
Corey,
much.
I'd be really blessed if you could use something halal like KFC, but
okay,
please,
I'll see what I could do on that one. Listen, I think one of the things that is still TBD for me is exactly how much Naheed Nenshi is interested in reshaping the party and rebuilding it in different ways. I said this a lot to people probably in text chats more than I did like on the podcast or anything while he was running, and it tended to be like really diehard New Democrats who were saying, I don't know about Naheed Nenshi. And I said, yeah, I can understand that, because the question becomes, is this just putting water in your wine, or is this just a guy who prefers water? And is he actually a New Democrat? And if he's not actually a New Democrat, how much is he going to change the party? Is it going to be recognizable? And what does that mean? And I'll tell you this. It's going to mean different things to different people. People who have been with the New Democrats for a long time will probably feel pretty bad about that. I'm not sure it's electorally bad, but if you have a bunch of candidates, the largest opposition ever elected under Rachel Notley, a little bit more of a cause focus, a little bit more left-wing, and a leader who is more moderate, you can see all sorts of potential troubles ahead and tensions, and how those get managed, I think, is going to be part of the story of the next 2 years. Some of it, he's going to have to walk towards them. Some of it, they're going to walk towards him. Certainly, he's got a strong hand for that because he got 86% of the vote. But listen, I don't think this is a slam dunk. He has never led in a poll that I've seen. I've heard of one poll done by Janet Brown where he led, but he has never led in a publicly released poll. And people should not measure the drapes yet. There's a lot of big open questions on the Naheed Nenshi leadership, and it's going to take a lot of work. If you want Naheed Nenshi to be premier, you better get out there and volunteer and donate and get involved in your constituency association, because, well, your immediate group might say, oh, wow, we got this guy, he's going to win the next election. The data around us tells a very different story, and it's still very much Danielle Smith's election to lose.
Jordan in our live chat wonders, have you ever seen a McRib before it's cooked? And nobody needs to see that. And I think Carter, the point that Jordan reiterates is political parties, much like the McRib, should not be presented for public consumption before they're ready.
Well, and that's one of the interesting things with Naheed Nenshi. Zain kind of presented it as a positive that there was exactly zero political policy discussed in the campaign. I'm interested to see where we wind up. What does the New Democratic Party, the Alberta New Democratic Party, look like? What is it going to be advocating for? There's a little bit of a shotgun approach that's kind of happened since the victory. I'd really like them to settle down, figure out what the values are and what it is that they're actually trying to win. That was one of the strengths of the campaign. We didn't have to see Naheed Nenshi putting out a ton of policy in order to win, but now it becomes a little bit of a negative, and we need to see what it is that he actually wants and values if we're going to see him get a big lift in the polls. We're not seeing that lift now. The polling that we've seen to date, both public and private, shows him well behind Danielle Smith, who continues to do, in most Albertans' minds, a fairly good job. Not in my mind, but in most Albertans'
Okay,
minds.
let me ask you about this. Kenzie in our chat says, Nenshi's still harping on about hockey tickets instead of things that matter. How much of this story around entitlement, nepotism, however you want to approach that. Smith, staffers, the Premier herself accepting tickets, luxury box tickets during the Oilers Stanley Cup run. How much of a liability could that be longer term for this Premier? And ultimately, for the former Wild Rose leader who went toe-to-toe against your former boss, Carter, Allison Redford, about things like corruption and entitlement. Are you a little surprised that this happened to Danielle Smith, or that Danielle Smith allowed it to happen?
Ryan, just a little correction. He also worked for Danielle Smith.
Oh,
Let's
thank
not
you.
forget
Yeah.
that.
Okay, fair.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, he says.
Listen, he's
into the skid, my friend.
You can't be talking about the rules have changed. Right, the rules have changed on the ethics rules. They're allowed to accept damn near anything if the chief of staff signs off on it. Albertans just aren't going to get fussed about that. This isn't one of those $18 orange juice situations. We're all trying to figure out how to get those moments where we can define the opposition, define our competitors in that fashion. This didn't work. I'd move off of it because it's not like you're going to have an ethics commissioner stand up and say this is wrong, because the rules have changed. The rules have changed, and maybe the rules were too tight before. Maybe they're too loose now. It doesn't matter. Albertans are more worried about significant issues than they are about these minor issues. And I think that Nenshi really needs to figure out how to communicate about healthcare, education, social services. Those are the issues that people are really going to care about in the coming months and weeks coming months and years. Before the next provincial election.
So I want to put this to the two of you, because I think that there's obviously nuance to be considered in the hockey ticket story. Like on one hand, I believe that the Premier of Alberta should be in a box in Vancouver with the Premier of BC and the Mayor of Vancouver when Edmonton and Vancouver are playing. Like, that just to me seems obvious. I don't think that there's any scandal there. I don't think that there's any optical problem there. I also think, though, that if you're accepting luxury box tickets from an individual or a company that's tied to the Turkish Tylenol scandal, that cost Albertans $75 million, that's a completely different story. And optically, I think that that's a total disaster. Are we talking about two different things here?
I think so. I disagree with Stephen here. I think that the ethics stuff does have legs, if only because it's now creating a pattern that will be difficult to get away from next time there is an $18 orange juice, right? Like, it will reactivate all of the talk about the luxury boxes and what are the rules, and you just have to go into the comment sections of usually supportive areas for the Premier. You can look at the post-media outlets. You can look at the Rebel News crowd and stuff. People are pissed on the right about this, right? This is the kind of entitlement that historically has antagonized conservative voters. And you never really want to lose your base, right? You can get away with a lot in modern day politics as long as you have your base, but it seems that her base is not particularly enthused about this. I think the bigger thing that Naheed Nenshi needs to get away from, I'll just throw out there and maybe we can walk away from, is trying to relitigate and protect his term as mayor. Like, I have not been fussed with him taking a hammer, metaphorically, to the UCP on the luxury boxes. I think that makes sense, and that's the kind of thing that he's very good at, should keep doing. I have no idea why he's relitigating conversations with Jason Kenney about the Green Line. Jason Kenney's not even in politics anymore. What in the fuck is that about? Pick your target, man. And I do worry for Naheed Nenshi that he just can't let things go. He cannot let things go. And when you have 10 years of tenure as mayor of Calgary, he will be very easily baited into some very dark alleys if he doesn't just say, that's not important. Jason Kenney's not on the ballot. The Green Line, that should be Jyoti Gondek's problem, not my problem. I haven't been mayor for 3 years, but yet he seems to be unable to step away from those things. The luxury box stuff is good stuff to go after.
On the luxury box, I would just add there's another narrative thread, Jespo, that I think could be interesting, which is Smith at the press conference, if I'm not mistaken, a couple of days after this story came out, I believe in the Globe and Mail, talking about how she doesn't necessarily take responsibility for her ministers. And I think if you're talking about long-scale and long-term narratives, I think ethics is one of them. Turkish Tylenol, this adds another interesting or depth of a chapter to that one. And then I think it's that third element is about leadership. I think all of them may have found their expiry date because She may have gotten lucky. American politics has been on overdrive. It's the summer, all those sort of things. I think they have a bit of a shelf life, but they need to be put and consolidated into narratives on ethics, on leaderships, and on, like, I guess the Venn diagram of two of them, which I think the Turkish Tylenol story describes and facilitates well. Unless there's a smoking gun, I think that this is very much about telling the story and using this as a proof point to add to those chapters when you keep bringing it up over and over again.
We're talking to Zain Velji, Stephen Carter, Corey Hogan, co-hosts of The Strategists, one of Canada's most listened to political podcasts. Katie Teeling did a great job the other day, an Alberta Views magazine contributor, live tweeting a Q&A with Alberta's Premier that was hosted by the Calgary Lougheed Constituency Association. The event, What Matters to You? One-on-one with Premier Danielle Smith. People can follow Katie online on Twitter at TeelingCat. We'll link to it in the show notes. Calgary Lougheed MLA Eric Bouchard, introduced by the group. Katie takes us through with the live tweet. I'm not sure if you guys read it. It was like 80 tweets, all the questions the Premier was asked, things that people wanted to know. Some recurring themes here around vaccines and children being vaccinated. There was some talk on immigration. There was a lot of, like, if I can just generally characterize it, from the more right wing of the side of that constituency association, more concerns there. And the Premier's trying to navigate this. The point I'm getting at, my question is, ahead of her leadership review at the AGM on the 2nd of November, just ahead of the American election, Carter, your face just exploded into a smile. So I'm going to go to you first. How does a political party leader, most particularly the Premier, need to approach a leadership review? Why is it so significant? Ask Ralph Klein, ask Ed Stelmach and others. Why is it significant? And what might we expect to see between now and the beginning of November from Alberta's Premier?
Well, I mean, we're going to see her moving more to where she thinks she needs to go in order to hold on to power. And the questions that are being asked of her, the people who are most mobilized, tend to be the Take Back Alberta type crowd, although there's all kinds of organizational drama around Take Back Alberta. But bottom line, there's a large group of people that put her into this seat, that put her in as the Premier, that harbor conspiracy theories. And one of the challenges of being in government is that you become the conspiracy theory. You become the person who's in charge of making sure that children are vaccinated. Oh no, we can't have children being vaccinated. So those are real issues. Those are real challenges, and we have issues that surround them, and those issues will come up during the leadership process. I'll be shocked if she gets over 80%. And we've seen time and time again that anything under 80% is a death knell for conservative politicians.
Okay, we want to thank Zain for participating. He had to take off. He had a hard out at 10. And but Corey, I want to put the same question to you, because I think here's the thing, like, put into, like, really dumbed down at a low level of strategy. You would think Smith's gonna swing right, or sort of placate or appeal to the more conservative, the more socially conservative side of the base ahead of November, get through that leadership review, and then do her best to kind of bring it back to the mainstream middle by the time there's another election. Generally speaking, is that what you might expect to see?
Yeah, you dance with the guy that brought you, and she was elected by the right of the party. And if she loses the right of the party, she loses the party, she loses the premiership. That's just it, right? You have to assume that coming up to the November review, that she's going to do things to placate that particular base. And we know what some of those topics are likely to be. We've seen it with transgendered sport. We've seen, obviously, an Alberta police force is on the table. Maybe an Alberta pension plan, somehow the can gets kicked. It's not popular enough to pass a referendum yet, but maybe there's ways they can give people hope on that. And the list goes on, right? There's so many lists of different right-wing causes that she could potentially dangle in front of people. And probably, as core to all of this is going to be some sort of authority for the membership and for the grassroots and for the caucus that she's going to have to put in front of people to say, I am still somebody who believes in the cause. And so expect to see that. And what I think that we saw last election, and she probably learned this lesson pretty hard, and I think the NDP should be watching this too, is you can actually run it pretty close to the line. You can be pretty right-wing, pretty outside of public opinion until, I don't know what, Stephen, like 30 days
yeah.
before. And then you're just like, no,
actually,
we love healthcare. actually, we're not going to do anything wild. And then just move on. And by the way, even though some of those were clearly, I'll say charitably, words selected very carefully to leave an impression that was inaccurate around the Alberta pension plan, I'm thinking in particular, she's not being punished in the polls. So, the lessons that she's been taught by the electorate are she can get away with this. So she's going to run a pretty right-wing government, I suspect, right up until she feels she doesn't have to, which will be the campaign.
Yeah.
Carter, is that a model of a water bomber behind you? There's a really cool aircraft model that's on the shelf behind you. It looks like some sort of a bush rig.
Yeah, it's the one Lego piece that I've done. It's a water bomber.
Yeah, very cool. Just to mention that for the people listening on the podcast. I wanted to ask you about Smith's handling of the fire, in particular our July 26th interview that wraps with her sharing with our audience concern that Parks Canada may try to shrink the footprint of human activity in Jasper National Park. And there was real public response to that comment from the Premier. Your assessment of her going on the record with that?
Well, it's just bullshit politics. Let me do what Marc Miller should have done and say you don't play politics with natural disasters. And this is not the time to bring the federal government into it. Jasper has not been a town that has been under federal pressure for shrinking the footprint. This is coming out of nowhere. No one's talking about it. And it's absolute and complete bullshit that the Premier would take an opportunity from a natural disaster like this to start throwing shade at the federal government. It's not even fucking thinking about it. It just makes me so angry. This is a Premier who decries people playing politics with things until she does it. So as far as I'm concerned, it was a low blow against the federal government. It is creating us versus them when it just simply doesn't exist. And anybody who falls for it is just being manipulated by a political operative that is very comfortable in lying to the electorate.
Corey, agree or disagree?
I know Danielle. I know we all know Danielle. I think it's likely she probably heard somebody say this was a possibility and perhaps it got blown up. But the way they're talking is like it's going to be one skyscraper with a safe injection site in the lobby. And that's not on. You're going to end up with a rebuilding of the town that's going to look fairly similar to the current town. And what this does tell me, though, is, God, this is going to be painful. Just another thing we're going to be fighting with the feds on. There's a lot ahead here. There's going to be jurisdictional challenges with any rebuild. Anything of this nature is going to get contentious. It was contentious in Fort McMurray. It's contentious everywhere. And now just to add Parks Canada and the federal government as well, which is the natural villain in the UCP story. I don't know. Buckle up, Albertans. This is going to make us all want to go throw our heads through a wall.
You can learn more and connect with the Strategists at thestrategist.ca. We encourage you to subscribe to their podcast and support them on Patreon, like we do here at Real Talk. Guys, a bit of a fundraising bump on our front with you on the show. I want to give a shout out to James and Ken and Tony, who've all kicked in on our YouTube Super Chat. James doesn't want us to let you know that he's giving money to us and not you. He says he'd love to give the Strategists more money, but Zain's blowing it all on new domain names and says in good conscience he simply can't send you any more dough.
That's very true. He bought 2 more this week.
Yeah,
it makes sense to us.
My apologies for the lack of couch fucker content on this episode. I know you guys wanted to talk more about JD Vance, but I just couldn't find the segue. There was something with the McRib, but it just felt inappropriate,
No, there was. It was there. You just chose.
Yeah, you just have to talk about. We got to reach into the cushions on this one.
I chose to ignore it, like Nenshi needs to ignore the green line hook. Corey Hogan and Stephen Carter are 2/3 of one of our favorite podcasts, of course, joined by Zain Velji. Thanks for doing this, fellas. Sorry for getting to you late. Thanks for hanging around, and have an amazing weekend. We appreciate you.
You bet.
Thanks very much, Ryan. Talk soon.
Yeah, talk again, guys. You can also follow them on Twitter at StrategistPod.
I tell you, when Zain started talking about the McRib, and then he said the word shit, I think I got the runs right away. I'm sorry to end the pod like that. Also, I'm sad that he got out of the chat early because he had this basketball.
I wanted to ask about the basketball.
I could see a signature kind of on the side of it. I was going to say, like, it's got to be significant. It's got to be Canadian. I'm thinking it's a Raptor. I was like, is that like the Kawhi Leonard, obviously buzzer beater signed? Obviously, it's not that basketball. But I wanted to know the significance, and he had to get out of there.
Okay, so I've just texted him because we still have the Flamethrower coming up.
Yeah.
So we've got about 5 minutes before we wrap. So let's find out what the story is with the basketball. Although I suspect he had a meeting. He might be in a very serious meeting right now.
It was a question, and all we got was Stephen Carter's Lego. So
I like that Lego though. And he says I think Carter said that's the one bit of Lego that he's finished. One of the things, and I know that Lego can provide many life lessons. I will never forget building a beautiful yellow Lego castle with my grandpa Rudy. I don't know how long the castle lasted. It took days and days to build, but I still remember it to this day. But with Wyatt, with our kid, Wyatt Rudy, named after his great grandpa, I found that like both Wyatt and I have some focus issues. And so we'll get a project like 2/3 built or like 3/4 done, and then it just sits there. And both of us are going to have to learn together to apply ourselves more diligently to get those projects done so you can put them up on the shelf. Were you a big Lego guy growing up?
Yeah, back in the day. And then now I've just been looking at it again because there's so much Star Wars stuff. And
so cool.
I'm not a huge Star Wars nerd, but I always go back and watch the movies and watch the new ones. And then I was just like, man, I gotta put together like a stormtrooper or something. They've got so much of it, and it's so much better. When we were a kid, we had to actually they had the ones you could make, but for the most of the time it was our imagination. Now it's like they come with instructions. They come with pre-built little guys with hats, and they're the actual characters. It's incredible. But
have
then
you seen
again,
those Lego?
I'm also an adult.
I don't
have time.
No, okay, time is one thing, but there's no age limit on Lego. I'll tell you.
But if I picked up Lego, my partner would be like, "What the fuck are you?"
Well, so let me ask you about this, because there's a new. Have you seen these Lego flower bouquets?
Oh yeah.
I wonder if that could be the new thing. Like you present your beloved partner with
like,
Lego
what
flowers.
Are you doing?
How stoned are you right now?
Let's go sniff some real flowers. Let's smell the tulips, or buy me a real bouquet, Johnny.
Yeah. Erica, I love this in the live chat. This is like the absolute best kind of feedback, Erica, and thank you for this. Says, great show, great discussion. I very much appreciate those of you who can agree to disagree and engage in civilized debate.
Right?
I feel like you've hit the nail on the head. Yeah. That's exactly what we try to do.
We wanted to give you an extra added bonus with lots today because we're taking a week off, so we shoved it all in for you.
James says, in the Lego movie, when the space Lego character could only build a spaceship, I felt seen. There you go, James. Happy to hear it. This conversation with the strategist was presented by Complete Care Restoration. And we're talking a lot about wildfire right now, obviously, and a big part of their team is going to be out in Jasper helping folks get their lives back, their homes, their businesses. But Complete Care Restoration operates across the province, into Western Canadian provinces outside Alberta as well. More than 25 years of experience restoring properties and rebuilding peace of mind. You can learn more about their services, including hazardous material removal, contents processing, emergency repairs, by visiting their website. In case of emergency, they're ready to respond 24/7 online at completecarerestoration.ca. This is the part of the show where we invite any kids in your home that may be anywhere near us to put on the earphones, kids, the earmuffs, because courtesy of our friends at the DQs of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park, this is your chance to bring us your hot takes. It's the Flamethrower. These are all real emails to talk@ryanjesperson.com, and this one opens hot and heavy from Travis P., who writes in, "Fuck off, Jesperson, on your constant defense of Premier Smith. I really like your show, but it seems like every time she's on, you carry water for her. You know, if Notley was in the situation of Smith with Jasper and got emotional at a podium, the same people would not be criticizing her. You're right, except for she did go through Fort McMurray, and the conspiracy nuts did criticize her and made comments that she actually lit the fires herself. So Fuck off! I don't believe Danielle Smith's crocodile tears. She's a fake. She's a phony. And she'll continue to do what she needs to stay in power. She cut wildland firefighters. Better blame Justin Trudeau. And then some tears to sell it to her base. Don't forget criticizing Jasper's mayor to spread the blame around. How do I know the premier's lying? Her mouth is moving. So no, Ryan, I won't feel bad for crying foul at her tears. That from Travis P. Meantime, we got this one from Sheryl A, who says, Jespo, others cheers at the premier's tears. Last Friday was a new low for people acting badly just because they can. Now, I'm not a fan of the premier, and I don't know her personally. Maybe it's better to say that I'm not a fan of the governing body in Alberta, which includes the premier by association. But do I hate her? Do I have to hate her if I didn't vote for her? This concept that we can disagree with a person or an organization without hating them seems to be a rare commodity. We cannot like somebody and also not harm somebody, right? Name-calling, person bashing. Are we that emotionally anorexic? Is this the social maturity of our society? I don't get it, says Sheryl. Every person that votes the same as me and thinks the same as me who is also hurling hate at others, you are not my people. No thank you. Haters only know how to harm. Give me a wide berth. Thanks, Jespo, for calling it out. I appreciate your voice of sanity in a time of insane hate for hatred's sake. That from Sheryl A. And then there's this one from Gerald, who said, I don't think the issue, Ryan, is Danielle Smith's tears. The issue is her cuts to so many programs. Her and Pierre Poilievre last summer being dismissive of the idea that these fires had environmental factors. Her behavior, her words, her policies make her partially responsible for the issues she's upset about. And I do truly believe, says Gerald, that Smith is torn up over Jasper, just not torn up enough to do things to actually improve and prevent the situation that causes or exacerbates these problems. She proved her need to push an agenda over her people with that comment about shrinking the footprint of Jasper. She didn't say I represent Alberta and I want to ensure I'm at the table with local knowledge to make them whole. Nah, she fear-mongered on Real Talk that Ottawa wants to hurt you at a time of great stress. So the tears may be real, but so is the division and the avoidance and the lack of investment that she's responsible for. That from Gerald. These are all emails to talk@ryanjesperson.com, presented weekly by the DQs in Palisades, Namao, Newcastle, Westmount, and Baseline Road. It's a perfect time for a blizzard at the DQs of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. Hey friends, Johnny and I and the Relay team are taking summer vacation next week, which means it's a great time to catch up on past episodes. Make sure you subscribe to our email at the bottom of the page, ryanjesperson.com. We've got a special email going out on Sunday with an announcement you won't want to miss. Thanks for being a part of this episode. Thanks for subscribing to us on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts, and most importantly, for telling your friends. We'll talk to you again soon.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jesperson, executive producer Josh Dunford, technical producer John Hicks, general manager Katie Cook-Chivers, account coordinator Lawrence Derlego, human resources Lena Shepard, website design Mike Johnston, voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton. Real Talk's editorial board is Supriya Dwivedi, Ahmed Ali, Randy Morin, Ann Castleman, Corey Hogan, Harmon Candola, Catherine O'Neill, and Chris Henderson. Member Emerita, Julie Rohr. Real Talk is recorded in Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux, home to the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Real Talk is a relay project. For more,